All right, guys. So we're looking at the early years of the United States. Tonight's notes are looking at the geographic changes that are taking place in the United States. And the main geographic change that we're going to be talking about is territorial expansion. The United States is growing. It's growing from the original 13 states plus the territory ceded to those states by Great Britain. So basically, the Mississippi River to the Atlantic Ocean was the original territory owned by the United States, to eventually encompass everything from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. And we're going to talk about why the United States, the people of the United States, wanted to expand its territory during that time period. And we're going to look at how they acquired these new pieces of land. And we're going to look at the effects that that had on opportunity for various groups. So first thing I want to look at is the motivations. Why does the United States want to add territory during this time period? And the primary motivation is for land. America's population is growing. The first census calculated that the American population was about 4 million people, and that number is growing rapidly. And they're just running out of land along the East Coast. And so Americans are desiring new land that they can go and settle and set up their own farms. The other motivation that's going to be driving this territorial expansion is this idea of manifest destiny. And this is a commonly held belief by people in the United States at the time that it was the destiny of the United States. It had already been decided that the United States was going to control all of the territory from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. That is what is going to happen, and it was just their job to help bring that about. So, how did the United States go about adding on new territory? Well, they used a variety of methods. First method they used was through purchase. And the major purchase that they made during this time period was the Louisiana Purchase. And this was made by Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, as president, buys the Louisiana Territory, which includes Louisiana as well as other states along the, or just west of the Mississippi River. Purchases this territory from France for $15 million, which by today's money doesn't seem like a lot, but really in actuality at that time, it's really a big chunk of change. It's a pretty expensive purchase, and a lot of people were actually upset with Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was somebody who was not in favor of a big federal government, and this is a kind of a big federal government thing to do, is to spend a lot of money and buy new land. But Thomas Jefferson, remember, one of his motivations was he wanted the United States to be a bunch of small farmers. And you can't have a bunch of small farms unless you've got a lot of land. And purchasing that land makes that possible. The United States will also gain new land through treaty or agreement. For example, they'll gain Florida through a treaty with Spain. They'll gain Texas through annexation. Texas had fought a war with Mexico to win its own independence, and then Texas gets annexed by the United States. And then the Oregon Territory is gained through a treaty with Great Britain. And then the final way land was gained during this time period was through war. The United States went to war with Mexico and won that war, and because of that victory, they gained the American Southwest. Places like California, Arizona, New Mexico are added to the United States territory as a result of that war. So, how did territorial expansion affect opportunity? And we're going to see that it's going to lead to opportunity. And the main group that's going to benefit from this expansion and lead to more opportunity for them are settlers. These new territories provide new lands for the settlers, and many Americans and new immigrants to the United States will move westward to establish farms in the West. But even though there's more opportunity in the West, that doesn't mean it was guaranteed success. There's lots of hardships associated with settling the American West. Many settlers are going to die en route along routes like the Oregon Trail, which is very famous for as a route westward. Many will die as a result of disease, accidents, because there's really no one there to help you in the middle of the wilderness in the West. It's also not uncommon for there to be Native American attacks. Remember, these settlers are moving through territory and sometimes settling on territory controlled by Native Americans, who are not necessarily going to appreciate these settlers moving through. The door of opportunity will remain closed for some groups, especially Native Americans. As the United States is gaining new territory for the purpose of opening up land for settlers, These settlers are going to be moving on to lands already occupied by Native Americans. And in 1830, the Indian Removal Act is passed that forcibly removes all Native Americans from east of the Mississippi to the Indian Territory, which is now Oklahoma. So they were forcibly taken from their homes and moved. They had to walk to Indian Territory, and many died along this journey, which has infamously become known as the Trail of Tears. One of the other side effects of territorial expansion during this time is that sectional identities develop, right? The United States is going to be divided kind of into three sections. The first is the North, which continues to be largely agricultural, but we're beginning to see the emergence of factories in the North. And in the North, we're also going to see rapid growth within cities, as many immigrants are moving to the United States from Europe. The South is also going to have its own sectional identity. So agriculture is going to completely dominate the economy of the South. And plantations, which we saw develop really early on in places like Virginia, which depend on slave labor to produce cash crops, are going to become even more important to the economy of the South. And then this new section, the West, that's going to be created as the United States grows, is going to develop its own identity. The West is going to be settled by mostly poor and middle-class Americans, as well as new immigrants, who are seeking the opportunity that the new land in the West offered.